The fluorescent lights on the ceiling of the courtroom cast a cold, harsh glow, reflecting off the stiff face of Harper Calloway as she sat in the defendant's chair. The evidence against Harper was flawless. Security cameras had caught her at the scene of the crime at exactly the critical moment, the murder weapon bore her fingerprints, and a witness swore to having seen her near Brandon Miller's apartment the night he was killed. Layer upon layer of evidence built up, creating an airtight case with no cracks. Harper knew she had never set foot in that apartment on that fateful night, but the trial didn't care about her defense. Inspector Michael Harrington stood grimly on the prosecution's side, his face cold and unyielding. He was overseeing the case, repeatedly telling the media that the evidence against Harper was undeniable. Everything moved too fast, too smoothly, as though everything had been carefully orchestrated. In the spectator section, Grayson Hayes, Harper's former colleague, sat motionless. His eyes were sharp, expressionless, but beneath that, a storm was quietly raging. He couldn't believe Harper was a murderer. She was one of the best officers he had ever worked with, a woman who pursued justice with both her mind and her heart. Suddenly, a loud bark echoed through the room. All eyes turned to Rex, Harper's dog, being led out of the courtroom by an officer. But Rex refused to leave. He braced himself, his body stiff, growling fiercely. His front paws scraped against the floor tiles. Rex's eyes locked onto Harper, resisting with all his might. Other officers had to join forces to drag Rex out of the room, but he kept thrashing, whining sharply, his gaze never leaving Harper. Harper glanced at Rex one last time before being escorted out, a dull ache flaring up in her chest. She wasn't afraid of death, she was afraid the truth would be buried forever. After the trial, Rex was transferred to another unit. Once Harper was incarcerated, the officers in the new unit quickly noticed his unusual behavior. The dog, once rigorously trained and disciplined, was now completely distracted. Every command from the trainer was ignored. Rex no longer responded quickly as he used to. He refused to eat, lying in a corner of the kennel with his eyes constantly fixed on the door, waiting for someone. Even during training sessions, he had no interest in the exercises he had once excelled at. Not long after, reports from the unit showed that Rex was no longer fit for duty. Some officers suggested transferring him to a training center for reconditioning or even retiring him. But when this information reached Grayson Hayes, he immediately offered to adopt Rex. Grayson visited the training facility one late afternoon. When he entered, Rex lay still, unmoving. Grayson crouched down, gently placing his hand on the dog's head. "You remember Harper, don't you?" he spoke softly, his words seemingly reaching Rex. The dog suddenly whimpered and then bolted toward the door, scratching at it like he was desperate to go outside and search for something. A trainer nearby shook his head. "He's been like this ever since. Every time he hears the name Calloway, he reacts this way." Grayson had seen many dogs loyal to their handlers, but his instincts told him that Rex's behavior was far more than just simple longing. The way Rex reacted, it wasn't just missing Harper. It was something deeper, more profound. Rex wasn't just grieving, he was waiting for her, as if somehow she would come back to him. Grayson had never seen a dog behave as strangely as Rex. In the past few days since adopting him, he had hoped to help him stabilize after the shock of losing his owner, Harper. But it seemed that was impossible. Rex refused to adapt to his new environment, rejecting all basic training commands he had once followed flawlessly. Worse still, Rex had started refusing to eat. At first, Grayson thought maybe Rex just needed time to adjust. But when the food bowl remained untouched for 2 days straight and the dog only sat in a corner, staring blankly at the door, Grayson knew something was wrong. Every time he approached, Rex would let out a soft whine, then lower his head to the floor, as if he wanted to say something but couldn't. Grayson tried everything, from offering Rex his favorite beef to taking him outside to run around, but nothing changed. The situation came to a head one night when Rex suddenly growled in the dark. Grayson woke with a start at midnight, hearing the deep growl of Rex from the living room. He jumped out of bed, grabbing the gun from the table before heading outside. The faint streetlight filtered through the curtains, casting a dim glow on Rex's sleek black coat. He stood there, rigid as a bowstring, his eyes fixed firmly on the front door. His back was slightly arched, and his ears were upright in complete alertness. Grayson held his breath, gripping the gun tightly. He quietly moved to the window, gently pulling back the curtain to peer outside. But there was nothing. The street was as quiet as ever, no shadows lingering in the dark. But Rex remained tense. He stayed perfectly still, one paw slightly lifted, a sign of heightened vigilance. Grayson could feel the tension in the air. Although he saw nothing, Rex had sensed something that humans couldn't see or hear. Grayson decided he couldn't let this continue. "Let's go for a walk, buddy. Looks like you've got something you want to tell me." He grabbed the leash and clipped it onto Rex's collar. The moment he heard the click of the clasp, Rex immediately jumped up, no longer sluggish as before. He tugged the leash toward the door, whining urgently, as if he had been waiting for this moment for a long time. Nightfall cloaked the city in a quiet, inky blackness, broken only by the faint glow of streetlights spilling down onto the wet pavement. Grayson walked behind Rex, but he quickly realized he wasn't the one leading, Rex was guiding him. As soon as they left the neighborhood, the dog picked up speed. It tugged at the leash, its strong legs driving it forward as if it already knew the destination. Grayson struggled to hold on to the leash, but Rex was stronger than he had expected. It kept pulling ahead, its nose sniffing the air incessantly. It wasn't wandering aimlessly, it was following a scent. "Rex, slow down," Grayson muttered under his breath, tugging gently on the leash. But Rex paid him no mind. Its body was taut, tail straight, ears erect, completely focused on something ahead. And then Grayson realized where they were heading, a narrow alley near the crime scene of Brandon Miller, the man Harper was accused of murdering. Grayson froze for a moment, his heart pounding. This wasn't a coincidence. Harper had been charged with killing Miller right here, and now, after days of unsettling behavior, Rex was leading him back to this place. He slowly stepped into the dim alley, turning on his flashlight. His eyes scanned for anything out of the ordinary, scattered trash, some old wooden crates, a few broken shards of glass from shattered bottles. Nothing that stood out. But then, as Rex began scratching at the cement floor near the wall at the end of the alley, Grayson noticed something strange under the light. He bent down and picked up a piece of material that had the color and texture of skin. Instantly, a chill ran down his spine. It was disturbingly soft, smooth to the touch, yet with a slight elasticity. It felt like human skin. He inhaled sharply, an unease creeping into his chest. This couldn't be real skin, but it was too lifelike. The material was smooth but not hard, with just enough give, like some kind of biopolymer. He quickly gathered it up for further investigation. But more than that, an unsettling fear began to worm its way into his thoughts. If his suspicions were correct, it meant Harper was truly being framed. Rex still wouldn't leave, its gaze fixed firmly on the spot where it had just dug, as if something was hidden beneath. Grayson tried digging around with his hands but found no other clues. With a sigh, he stood up, clutched the piece of synthetic material tightly, and pulled Rex out of the alley. While Grayson waited for the analysis results of the strange material fragment, another piece of bad news arrived, another murder. This time, the victim was Harvey Donovan, a well-known businessman. Grayson sat at his desk, the dim light from his desk lamp casting faint shadows on the stack of files in front of him. A photo of the crime scene of Harvey Donovan lay next to the file on Brandon Miller's case. Grayson's eyes narrowed as he analyzed every detail meticulously. Everything was eerily similar, from the angle of the shot, the position of the body, to the arrangement of the crime scene. This wasn't just the work of a simple murderer. It looked like a signature, a kind of mark left by the killer. But was it a coincidence, or was it a deliberate pattern? Grayson pressed his hand against his temple, feeling as if an invisible weight was pressing down on his mind. The police had quickly charged Harper in Miller's case, and now, as he was trying to prove her innocence, another murder happened in exactly the same manner. It couldn't be a coincidence. Someone out there was deliberately repeating the crime, or worse, the killer was still out there, free to act again. Rex remained lying near the desk but no longer in a relaxed state. The dog's ears perked up, its watchful eyes following Grayson closely. Suddenly, it moved from its spot, walking over to the desk and sniffing intently at the photos. A low growl emanated from its throat. And then, unexpectedly, Rex nudged one of the photos, the close-up shot of the crime scene of Harvey Donovan. Grayson frowned and bent down to follow Rex's gaze. He gently ran his fingers over the surface of the photo, his eyes scanning every detail. At first glance, the crime scene looked like a pristine, upscale apartment, unnervingly tidy, with Harvey Donovan's body lying motionless in the center of the living room. But as Grayson looked closer, something unusual caught his eye. A small, nearly invisible symbol was drawn on the wall behind Donovan. It was faint, as if someone had intentionally wiped it away, but under the light, Grayson could still make out the shape, a triangle with a line cutting across it. Grayson immediately grabbed the photo of Brandon Miller's crime scene and held it up for comparison. His heart began to race as he noticed the same anomaly, the exact same symbol appeared on the wall in Miller's apartment. It wasn't clear, but if one looked closely enough, it was unmistakable. A shiver ran down his spine. This was no coincidence. This was a message. Rex let out a soft bark, as if confirming his discovery. It scratched lightly at the edge of the desk, its gaze urging Grayson to realize that they were dealing with something far bigger. The dog had noticed this before him, and now, Grayson couldn't ignore the truth any longer. Harvey Donovan wasn't just any businessman. He had money, political connections, and had done business with Brandon Miller before. They were both killed. But the most important question remained, who benefited from their deaths? Grayson returned to his desk, opened his laptop, and began searching for any data on cases that showed similar signs. But after hours of searching through the police system, he found no mention of the symbol. That only made him more certain that this wasn't just a regular symbol. It could be an identifying mark, a way of marking a target or even the killer's signature. He entered the symbol into the police's image analysis system, comparing it with any symbols that had appeared in past cases. But the system returned no matching results. Grayson furrowed his brow, feeling like he was facing a solid wall with no way to break through. Rex, however, still hadn't taken its eyes off the photos on the desk. Grayson, almost by instinct, bent down and gently petted its head. "What have you seen that I haven't, Rex?" Suddenly, a thought flashed in his mind. If the symbol didn't show up in the police database, maybe it wasn't related to any ordinary criminal case. It could belong to a group, an organization that the police had never encountered. Grayson stood up abruptly, quickly gathering the documents. He glanced at Rex, who was still on edge. The dog's senses were sharper than any human's, and Grayson knew its instincts had never been wrong. Maybe they had stumbled onto something much more dangerous than he had imagined. He hurriedly grabbed his phone, scanning through his contacts before stopping at a familiar name, Ethan Carter. Ethan was an independent investigative journalist, someone who specialized in digging into mysteries the police couldn't touch. If anyone knew anything about these strange symbols, it would be him. Grayson grabbed his coat and left the office, a weight in his chest. If the killer was still out there, it meant Harper was nothing more than a pawn in a much larger scheme. Grayson stepped into the small cafe nestled deep within the old district, where he was meeting Ethan Carter. Ethan Carter wasn't a stranger in the investigative journalism world. He had once been one of the top reporters, but his career came to a halt after an investigation that nearly cost him his life, a piece on a money laundering operation tied to high-ranking police officers. After that incident, Ethan became more cautious, staying out of the public eye, but he continued to work in the shadows, gathering information for those brave enough to chase the truth outside the system. The streetlights cast dim glows on the wet pavement left behind by the night's rain, creating a somber, heavy atmosphere, much like the weight this case was pressing on Grayson's shoulders. In a secluded corner, Ethan was already waiting, his focus locked on the laptop screen in front of him. When Grayson pulled out a chair and sat down, the investigative journalist pointed to an open file, his voice lowering. "We were right. Brandon Miller wasn't just an ordinary businessman. He had close ties with Black Widow, a professional assassin organization that operates in the shadows." Grayson quickly skimmed through the documents on the screen. The data showed that Miller had been involved in several shady financial transactions with unknown organizations. One of them matched the information he had found about Harvey Donovan, the second victim. In other words, both murders weren't coincidences. Grayson muttered, his expression darkening, "We're dealing with something much bigger than a wrongful conviction." Grayson's gaze remained fixed on Ethan's computer screen, the numbers, the illicit financial transactions between Brandon Miller and Harvey Donovan, and more chillingly, it was all directly tied to Black Widow, a professional assassin organization operating in the dark. Ethan pulled the laptop closer, his fingers quickly moving over the keyboard, opening another file. He leaned forward, his voice dropping to a whisper, as if afraid someone might overhear. "Do you remember the strange symbol you said you found at the crime scene?" Ethan asked, his eyes still locked on the screen. Grayson nodded. The image of the symbol was still vivid in his mind because it hadn't appeared just once, it had appeared twice, both at the scenes of Brandon Miller and Harvey Donovan's murders. Ethan turned the laptop toward him, displaying a series of images. "I've seen this symbol before. It's not just some random symbol or a signature of a killer. It's part of Black Widow's encryption system. This is how they mark their targeted hits, the ones they want to send a message with." Grayson squinted at the images in front of him. They were various assassinations across the globe, all unrelated on the surface, but there was one alarming common thread: at each crime scene, there was a mark similar to the symbol he had found. A mysterious sign appeared on walls, floors, and in some cases, carved into an object near the victim's body. "Damn it," Grayson muttered. "So this means these murders aren't random. They're part of a deliberate assassination chain, and they want someone to know." Ethan nodded. "Exactly. But the bigger question is why? Black Widow is an organization that operates in the shadows. They carry out professional hits, leaving no trace. But these symbols are too blatant for their usual style. Why would they deliberately leave a trace?" Grayson fell silent for a moment, his gaze fixed on the images on the screen. Something didn't add up. If Black Widow truly wanted to hide their presence, they wouldn't leave these symbols behind. But they were too obvious. And more importantly, the police had failed to recognize them. A chilling thought flashed through Grayson's mind. He clenched his fist on the table, his voice lowering. The police never mentioned this symbol in their investigation reports. No one at the department recognized it or included it in the official files. But I've seen it twice. And if I noticed it, someone else surely has as well. Ethan fell quiet at this observation. He took a sip of coffee, his sharp eyes seeming to look beyond what was in front of him. "You mean someone within the police department knows about these symbols but is turning a blind eye? Or worse?" Grayson gritted his teeth. "Someone in the department is working for Black Widow." Both of them fell into silence. If what Grayson said was true, then they weren't just up against a shadowy assassin organization, they were also facing a traitor within the very police force they relied on. Then what about the strange piece of material Rex led me to? Could it be related to the case? Grayson continued, pressing further. Ethan examined the material once more. It was soft to the touch, almost unbelievably so, unlike any plastic or silicone he had ever come across. When the light shone through, its surface reflected strangely, not too glossy, yet not entirely matte. It was something in between, a living material with a stretch similar to human skin. A light squeeze left tiny folds that quickly returned to their original shape. Ethan handed over the analysis report on the material to Grayson. It was a form of advanced biopolymer, a blend of synthetic tissue and a gel capable of mimicking the temperature and texture of human skin. This technology had never been seen in the mainstream market. It was too sophisticated, too advanced to be anything but a cutting-edge product. But what chilled Grayson the most was the forensic experts' finding: this material not only simulated human skin but could also be programmed to adapt to body temperature, making it undetectable even upon touch. If someone used it as a mask, the wearer would appear to be an exact replica of anyone. This revelation led him to a terrifying theory: someone had used this technology to create a counterfeit version of Harper. That was why the security cameras had recorded a perfect image of her at the crime scene. This was not just a random frame-up, this was a meticulously planned operation with technologies far beyond the reach of a lone individual. But there was still one unanswered question: why did Harper's fingerprints appear on the murder weapon? If someone had stolen her prints to forge them, that person would have had to be incredibly close to her. This realization sent a cold shiver down both Grayson's and Ethan's spines. Back home after the meeting, Grayson stood at the door of his apartment, clutching the envelope he had found in his mailbox earlier that morning. There was no sender's address, only a simple piece of paper with bold, cold words. "Stop now while you still can. If not, your dog will be the first to die." His gaze immediately dropped to Rex, the K-9 still sitting faithfully at his feet, looking up at him with those loyal eyes, as if understanding something was off. His black fur gleamed under the early sunlight, and his strong frame stood firm, untouched by harm. Grayson felt a cold shiver run down his spine. They hadn't struck yet, but the existence of this letter made it clear: they knew exactly where his investigation stood and wanted to send a very clear warning. A warning that if he didn't back off, there would be consequences. Soon after, news from the prison came in: Harper Calloway, the woman recently sentenced to death, was suddenly ordered to expedite her execution date. Normally, she would have time to appeal, but a high-level order had interfered, cutting all procedures short. No specific reason was given, only a brief announcement that her execution would take place within the next 10 days. Grayson tossed the letter onto the table, his eyes darkening. There was no longer any doubt: someone was pulling the strings of the entire system from the shadows. They didn't just want to silence Harper, they were ready to do anything to ensure this case was buried once and for all. He glanced at Rex. The dog was still quietly by his side, but his keen ears stood straight, his body taut, as if sensing the tension in his master. Everything was slipping further out of control, and Grayson knew their time was running out. The night was thick with mist, the streetlights casting faint, elongated streaks of light across the damp road. After receiving the threatening letter, Grayson had tried to follow any possible lead that might connect to the forces behind Harper's case. But everything seemed to hit a dead end. The sensation of being watched became more pronounced, yet there were no signs indicating who was pulling the strings in the shadows. To shake off the troubling thoughts, he decided to take Rex for a walk. Initially, the walk was just a simple stroll around the block, but before long, Rex began to act strangely. He tugged at the leash, his ears standing upright, heading straight for a familiar alley, the same alley where they had previously discovered the strange material. This time, without any hesitation from Grayson, Rex bolted forward, quickly digging through the dirt and debris on the concrete, as though it had identified something important. Under the flashlight's beam, Grayson saw something hidden among the dirt and refuse: a black leather glove, covered in dust and dark, dried red stains. As soon as he picked it up, he recognized the bloodstains on its surface. His heart began to race. This was not something in the case files. Someone had deliberately hidden it. If this was indeed a critical piece of evidence that had been overlooked, it could completely alter the direction of the case, and prove Harper's innocence. Grayson quickly bagged it as evidence, his gaze never leaving Rex, who remained still, his eyes sharp and fixed on the shadows, as though anticipating something. The forensic lab confirmed that the blood on the glove was not Harper's. But what left Grayson stunned was the true identity of the DNA sample. A name appeared on the screen: Jonas Quaid, a professional hitman once wanted nationwide for his involvement in a series of calculated assassinations. But what struck Grayson even more was that Quaid's file was connected to a secret organization Grayson had heard of before, Black Widow. This revelation hit Grayson like a heavy blow. If the blood on the glove belonged to Quaid, that meant he had been at the scene of Brandon Miller's murder. And if Quaid was the one who had actually carried out the killing, then Harper had clearly been framed. Grayson quickly copied the full lab results, condensed the files, and left the lab. He needed to bring this evidence to Detective Michael Harrington, the one responsible for overseeing Harper's case. If this was truly a conspiracy set up to frame her, the police needed to step in immediately. Michael Harrington took the file with an unreadable expression. His office was bathed in soft yellow light, the neat stack of files on his desk almost looking too tidy. Harrington opened the file, quickly scanning through the contents. "Are you sure about these results?" His voice was deep, betraying no hint of surprise or emotion. "I never bring unverified evidence to you," Grayson replied firmly. If Quaid was at the scene, then Harper was framed. Harrington leaned back in his chair, tapping his fingers lightly on the wooden desk. "Do you have any idea what you're involved in, Hayes?" Grayson stared back at him. "I know exactly what I'm up against. And I know someone in the system is covering up the truth." A heavy silence lingered, only the ticking of the clock breaking it. Then, unexpectedly, Harrington closed the file and set it aside. "I'll look into it. No affirmations. No guarantees." His answer hung in the air, suspiciously vague. Grayson clenched his fists, unease creeping up inside him. But there was nothing more he could do but leave, believing that the evidence had been handed over to the higher-ups. What Grayson didn't know was that the moment the door to the office closed behind him, Harrington took out a lighter and set the corner of the file on fire. The small flame spread quickly, devouring the pages containing the truth Grayson had risked so much to uncover. The evidence, destroyed. Harrington was the one pulling the strings of the city's darkest secrets. No one knew exactly when he had started his ties with the underworld, but the hidden financial trails in offshore accounts, his tangled connections with shady politicians and businessmen, told one undeniable truth: he was a loyal puppet of Black Widow, the infamous assassination organization operating in the shadows. Harrington wasn't merely covering up a murder, he was the one manipulating the evidence, flipping the case, and turning Harper into a scapegoat to protect an even darker secret. People like Brandon Miller and Harvey Donovan weren't just random victims. They were former Black Widow associates, eventually eliminated by the organization. And Harrington, the one with the power, was the one ensuring these executions never saw the light of day. He had cleaned up after Black Widow countless times, but this time, Harper's case was making things far too complicated. The overlooked clues, the growing suspicions, and now Grayson digging deeper into the truth, finding the blood-stained glove could be the fatal blow to his plan. But Harrington wasn't one to be easily toppled. He knew how to erase his tracks, and he was ready to do whatever it took to silence anyone who dared to challenge him. Grayson walked slowly along the sidewalk, his hands stuffed deep into his coat pockets, his head slightly lowered to avoid the casual glances of passers-by. A cold breeze blew through, carrying the scent of lingering moisture from the recent rain. But nothing could shake the heavy feeling weighing on his chest. What he had done wasn't just about handing over the evidence, it was a test. If Harrington was truly an upright man, he would help clear Harper's name. But if he was the manipulator in the shadows, the documents would be erased, and Grayson would know he was facing a real danger. Rex walked closely by his side, stepping with steady caution. The dog was no longer tense like it had been in Harrington's office, but its ears remained alert, scanning every sound around them. Throughout the investigation, Rex had reacted oddly to things no one else could sense, and now, as everything drew closer to the truth, Grayson trusted Rex's instincts would warn him before it was too late. Suddenly, his phone buzzed in his pocket. "Ethan, what the hell are you doing? You just put yourself in the crosshairs." Grayson glanced at the screen, his lips pressed tight. He quickly typed a simple response. "I need to know if he's the inside man." Only a few seconds passed before his phone rang again. Ethan was never the type to stay still when worried. His voice was urgent, even panicked. Do you realize what you just did? If Harrington is the inside man, he's not going to let you leave there in one piece. I know, Grayson replied briefly. You know. And you still did it? Do you understand this isn't a game of cat and mouse anymore? Black Widow has killed people just for standing in their way. If Harrington's part of them, how much time do you think you have left? Grayson fell silent. He looked down at Rex, the dog's sharp eyes locked onto the movements around them. No one understood survival instincts better than a working dog. And if Rex hadn't barked or shown signs of alarm, it meant they still had some time. But how much? An hour? A day? They knew from the start. Grayson's voice was low. On the other end of the line, Ethan paused. What do you mean? Since I began the investigation, someone's been following me. The threatening letters, the shadowy figures on the street whenever I left the office, and Rex's strange reactions. They didn't wait until I handed the file over to Harrington to know. They've known for a long time. Grayson exhaled deeply. I need to be sure, Ethan. If Harrington really is the inside man, he'll act the moment he gets the file. And I'll know how. Grayson stopped walking for a moment before answering. By watching the ones who will come to me first. Rex suddenly stopped. The dog tensed, its ears upright, eyes fixed on a car parked not far away. The windows were tinted, but Grayson could feel the intense gaze from within. A chill ran down his spine. Without saying another word, he tightened Rex's leash and quickly made his way toward a nearby alley. If anyone was watching, he wouldn't give them the chance to strike first. Meanwhile, in Harrington's office, everything was cloaked in darkness, the only light coming from the small flame slowly consuming the edges of the file on the desk. Michael Harrington sat back in his chair, watching as the pages burned away, the words turning to ash. He wasn't in a hurry, nor did he seem worried. Everything was unfolding just as he had predicted. Grayson Hayes had gotten too close to the truth. The phone on the desk vibrated, the screen showing an unknown number. Harrington picked up the phone, lifting it to his ear without a greeting. He's suspicious, the low voice on the other end spoke. I know, Harrington replied. But it no longer matters. A brief silence followed. Then the voice continued. So what's the next step? Harrington stared at the remaining ash on the desk. In the darkness, his eyes were cold. Eliminate him. Under the dim streetlights of the city, Grayson drove cautiously along the deserted road, his fingers gripping the steering wheel tightly. Since adopting Rex, he had become all too familiar with the feeling of being followed. But this time, the sense of unease settled deeper than ever before. The evidence they had uncovered was not just a clue, it was a direct challenge to Black Widow, a notorious assassin organization operating in the shadows. They didn't just kill for money, they also had powerful protectors within the system, ready to do anything to cover up their crimes. Grayson was not alone. In the passenger seat, Rex sat upright, his ears perked, his sharp gaze fixed, as though he, too, sensed the impending danger. The air in the car was thick with tension, only the sound of the engine echoing through the empty streets. But then, a strange noise shattered the silence. A black SUV suddenly accelerated from behind, surging forward at a suspicious speed. Grayson immediately sensed something was wrong. The SUV's window slid down, and a gun barrel appeared. Shit, he muttered, slamming his foot on the gas pedal. But it was too late. A barrage of bullets tore through the air, shattering the rear window. Sharp shards of glass sprayed throughout the car. Rex reacted instantly, ducking low to the floor of the car, but his eyes remained fixed on the SUV behind them. Grayson jerked the wheel hard, the car tilting as he swerved into a narrow alley. But the pursuers didn't give up. They kept right on their tail, firing again. Bullets struck the pavement just inches from the car, sparking in the dark. With no other choice, Grayson took a sharp turn into a narrower side street, hoping to lose them. But just before he could speed up, the SUV accelerated once more, closing the gap from behind. The tires screeched against the road, making a deafening sound. Grayson knew that if he got cornered, both he and Rex wouldn't make it out alive. And then, something unexpected happened. Rex, without hesitation, leapt up onto the passenger seat, lunging toward the steering wheel. In that brief moment, Grayson understood its intent. He gritted his teeth and spun the wheel hard in the direction Rex had pushed. The car swerved sharply, forcing the SUV onto the shoulder of the road. But what was truly astonishing was that Rex didn't stop. It lunged toward the car's window, growling fiercely, as if daring the enemy to come closer. The person inside the SUV hesitated for a second, just 1 second, but that was all Grayson needed. He slammed the brakes. The car slid, creating just enough space for him to twist the wheel and slip through an even narrower alley. But before they could fully escape, a bullet sliced through the air, grazing Rex's back. The painful bark of the dog echoed in the space. "Rex!" Grayson shouted, his eyes wide as he saw Rex's body sway slightly. But despite the pain, it stood firm, its eyes still gleaming with determination. There was no time to check the wound. Grayson tightened his grip on the wheel, focusing on getting out of the alley before the pursuers could react. Behind them, the screeching of tires continued. They hadn't given up. Grayson pressed the accelerator hard, the car shooting forward. But at a fork in the road, instead of continuing, he suddenly turned off the headlights, sharply steering into an abandoned parking lot. The car slid silently into the shadows, hiding among old, rusted vehicles. Immediately, Grayson cut the engine, holding his breath. The SUV sped past without noticing them. It wasn't until the sound of the enemy's engine faded into the distance that Grayson dared to exhale. He turned to look at Rex. The dog was panting heavily, but its gaze remained sharp. A streak of blood ran down its front leg, but fortunately, the wound wasn't deep. "Well done, old friend," Grayson whispered, gently placing his hand on Rex's head, feeling its strong breath beneath his palm. "We need to get you to a vet right away." "You're one tough dog, old friend," Grayson muttered, carefully placing Rex in the back seat. He quickly checked the wound. The bullet had grazed the front of Rex's shoulder, not penetrating deeply, but it still caused bleeding and could lead to infection if not treated quickly. Rex looked at him without showing any pain or fear. It simply panted, ears still perked, as if it was still on guard for danger. Grayson didn't hesitate. He started the car and drove off from the deserted lot. All that was on his mind was one thought: get Rex to the vet immediately. The dog's breath was steady but heavier than usual. Its thick coat was stained with a trace of blood from the wound, creating a faint red streak across its otherwise jet-black fur. Grayson could feel the tension in Rex's muscles, taut beneath the fur, as if it was still ready to fight despite the injury. Its paws trembled lightly, but the dark brown eyes remained alert, as if it didn't want to stop, didn't want to give up. Grayson clenched his fists, silently admiring its resilience. Every instinct in him screamed that they needed to get Rex treated immediately. But what hurt him more than anything was the look in Rex's eyes, not pain, not fear, but absolute determination. It was as if, for Rex, it wasn't about the wound, but about continuing the unfinished mission, continuing the search for Harper. He drove faster than usual, his fingers gripping the steering wheel, his mind a whirlwind of worry and anger. If Rex hadn't charged at the enemy today, they both might have been dead in that alley. But those people didn't care. They didn't hesitate for a second to pull the trigger, ready to kill anyone who dared get close to the truth. And now, Rex, the most loyal dog he had ever known, was the first to pay the price. The thought made Grayson grit his teeth, his eyes darkening. The car stopped in front of a small veterinary clinic, a place Grayson knew well. He trusted the doctor here, Lisa, a woman with experience who had worked with the police force before transitioning to animal care. The car door opened, and Grayson quickly lifted Rex out, heading into the clinic. Lisa, who had been cleaning up after a surgery, turned around, her eyes widening when she saw Rex's condition. Without asking any questions, she motioned for him to place the dog on the examination table. Grayson gently set Rex down, his hand instinctively brushing over its head. Despite the injury, it remained incredibly calm, only breathing heavily, ears perked as if listening for any sound around it. Lisa bent down to examine the wound, her skilled hands moving quickly but carefully. "A bullet grazed the front shoulder," she said, her voice serious. "Luckily, it didn't hit bone or vital organs, but the muscle is torn quite badly. It will need surgery and stitches, or it could get infected." Grayson nodded, his gaze never leaving Rex. The dog lay still on the table, but Grayson could feel the tension in every breath it took. Lisa continued her checkup, her hands gently gliding over Rex's body, making sure there were no other injuries. "It's a strong dog," she muttered, "but no matter how strong, it still needs care." Grayson's lips curled into a brief smile, but it didn't mask his concern. "I know." He sat down next to Rex, his hand resting on its back, feeling its warmth beneath the thick fur. Memories suddenly flooded his mind, times when he'd seen Harper train Rex, how she could command it without needing many words, just a look, a gesture. Rex always understood Harper more than anyone. The bond between them wasn't just that of a handler and a working dog, but of absolute trust, a connection that nothing could replace. And now, Harper wasn't there with it anymore. But Rex still kept searching for her. It didn't give up. It didn't forget Harper. Lisa prepared a mild anesthetic, injecting it into Rex's front leg to begin stitching the wound. Before its eyes closed, Rex still looked at Grayson with calmness, as if to say, "I'm fine. Don't worry." Grayson sighed, his hand brushing gently over its head once more. "You really are stubborn, old friend." The surgery lasted about 45 minutes. Lisa worked quickly but carefully, each stitch made with precision. Grayson stood by the entire time, never leaving for a second. He had seen too many people fall in his line of work. But seeing Rex on the operating table, with a wound on its shoulder, the sense of helplessness and anger inside him surged stronger than ever. When it was all done, Lisa removed her gloves and turned to him. "I've done everything I could. The wound will need time to heal, no heavy movement for at least a week." Grayson nodded, his gaze still fixed on Rex, who was slowly coming to after the anesthesia. Its breathing had steadied, its brown eyes opened slowly, sluggish but still filled with awareness. Grayson bent down, gently touching its head. "You'll be okay." Rex moved slightly, trying to shift its body but quickly realizing the difficulty due to the wound. But instead of showing weakness, it simply licked Grayson's hand lightly, as if to reassure him. Lisa watched them, sighing. "You won't stop, will you?" Grayson looked up at her, his gaze colder than ever. "I can't. Harper's still in prison. And they won't stop until everything is exposed." Lisa was silent for a moment before nodding. "Then keep safe. And don't let it get hurt again." Grayson lowered his head, carefully lifting Rex. His arm was steady, but inside, a storm raged. He had been warned that if he continued the investigation, Rex would be killed. And now, that warning had become reality. But if they thought this would make him stop, they were gravely mistaken. He exited the clinic quickly, heading for the car, opening the door and placing Rex into the back seat. The dog was more alert now but still needed rest. Grayson sighed, looking up at the star-filled night sky, his eyes gleaming with resolve. "We can't stop yet, old friend." Under the dim light in the temporary office, Grayson sat quietly at his desk, his eyes fixed on the scattered papers in front of him. The lines of text and numbers slowly came together, forming a frightening picture, a vast network of corruption hidden in the shadows, manipulating not only Harper's case but also many other murders. Ethan sat across from him, his fingers moving quickly over the laptop's keyboard, trying to trace the mysterious financial transactions they had just uncovered, unexplained sums of money, offshore accounts, and the same names repeatedly appearing on the list of recipients, all leading to a horrifying truth. Ethan looked up, his voice low but tense. "We're not just dealing with a personal attack. This is a professional killing system run by people with real power. And at the head of this network is Deputy Chief of Police Richard Vaughn." Grayson was not surprised. The name Vaughn had appeared too many times in the documents for it to be a coincidence. But what enraged him was the extent of his influence, a man who should have been protecting justice but was instead behind a professional hitman organization. The money transferred into Vaughn's accounts always appeared before or after the assassinations, like part of a hit contract, carefully disguised as funding or investment in shady funds. This explained why Black Widow could operate without being detected for so long. They were not just hired killers, they were part of a larger, powerful machinery that was covering for them. Grayson clenched the paper in his hand, his gaze darkening. He's not just part of this network. He's the one at the top. Ethan nodded, continuing to sift through the list of involved individuals. But Vaughn isn't working alone. He needs a system to keep everything in place. And that's where people like Michael Harrington come in. Detective Michael Harrington, the one who had overseen the entire investigation into Harper's case, the one who had claimed the evidence against her was undeniable. He had manipulated everything, ensuring no one could find any holes in the case. And now, he was clearly listed among the people receiving money from Black Widow. A wave of anger surged in Grayson's chest as he recalled the moment he handed the bloodied glove to Harrington. At the time, he had believed that such undeniable evidence would force the case to be reopened. But now, Harrington had undoubtedly destroyed it. He couldn't afford anything to stand in Vaughn's way, and that was why he had gone to great lengths to cover up the case. Ethan slid a forensic report across to him, his voice serious. "But there's something he doesn't know. We still have a piece of the glove." Grayson stared at the report. Before handing over the evidence to Harrington, he had carefully cut a small piece from the glove and sent it to an independent lab. The results confirmed what he had suspected: the blood on it belonged to a fugitive murderer, someone directly linked to Black Widow. This not only proved that Harper's case had been staged but also represented a crucial link that could expose the entire system behind it. Grayson took a deep breath, his hand tightening until his knuckles turned white. Harrington thinks he's wiped away all the traces. But he doesn't know we still have the evidence. Ethan looked at him steadily, a hint of hesitation in his gaze. "What are you going to do?" Grayson didn't answer right away. He turned to look at Rex, the dog still lying calmly next to them, its sharp eyes watching every movement in the room. Without realizing it, Grayson remembered all the times Rex had helped them find clues, from pulling him to the alley where they discovered the strange mask fragment, to the bloodied glove, and the time it saved him from pursuers. Without Rex, they would likely have been erased by Black Widow long ago. Rex wasn't just a working dog. He was a true teammate. A plan began to form in Grayson's mind. He knew Harrington thought he was still safe, believing all the evidence had been destroyed. But that was his greatest weakness. When a man thinks he has nothing left to hide, he becomes careless. And that was when Grayson would strike. He stood up, taking the forensic report with him, his voice firm. "We're not going to confront Vaughn directly. He's too smart to fall for an easy trap. But Harrington is different. He's a pawn, and he doesn't know he's been exposed. If we corner him, he'll make a mistake." Grayson stepped out of his makeshift office, a heavy sense of unease pressing down on his shoulders. Over the past few days, he and Rex had followed every lead they could find to prove Harper's innocence. Yet everything still felt like fragmented pieces of a puzzle. Still, he had no time for discouragement. The forces behind this case were too powerful, and with each passing second, Harper moved closer to the day of her execution. Then, a shock hit like a thunderclap on a clear day. Another assassination had occurred, and this time, the victim was a prominent political figure, a senator with a strong voice in anti-corruption investigations. What stunned Grayson into silence, however, was the fact that all the evidence pointed straight to him. Security cameras showed footage of him near the crime scene, his fingerprints were on the murder weapon, and even a witness claimed to have seen him leaving the area right after the murder took place. It all mirrored exactly what had happened with Harper. This was no longer just a simple frame-up. It was a coordinated hunt, a hidden hand pulling all the strings. When the police stormed his residence, Grayson knew he had no choice but to run. He bolted through the back door, Rex right beside him, its eyes filled with alertness. The police SUV blocked the road ahead, its headlights sweeping across the street corner. Armed agents flooded in, cutting off all possible exits. Without hesitation, Grayson let out a sharp whistle. It was a signal he and Rex had used for years in dangerous missions. Instantly, the dog darted toward a low wall nearby, jumped up, and looked back, its eyes urging him to follow. Without a second thought, Grayson followed suit, gripping the edge of the wall and swiftly climbing over. When he landed on the other side, Rex was already waiting, poised for the next move. They immediately dashed into a dark alley, the sound of police footsteps hot on their heels. Running through the city wasn't easy, especially with the entire police force on his tail. But Grayson knew he had an advantage, Rex. Unlike humans, Rex had a remarkable survival instinct, sensing danger long before it arrived. And right now, the dog was his second pair of eyes. Grayson tried to steady his breath, his mind racing against time. He couldn't just keep running without a clear direction. He needed to find a safe hiding place, a spot where he could turn the tables. But as he tried to figure out his next move, Rex suddenly stopped. Its ears perked, its nose sniffing the air around them. "What's up, boy?" Grayson whispered. But Rex didn't respond. It just stood still, then abruptly darted off in an entirely different direction. Grayson hesitated for a moment, but then he decided to trust the dog's instincts. He followed Rex, letting his feet carry him in sync with its stride. They cut through narrow alleys, ran past deserted parking lots, until they stopped in front of an abandoned warehouse. Rex barked softly, then scratched at the rusty metal door, as if to signal to Grayson that this was the place they had been searching for. Grayson gently pushed the door, which creaked in the darkness. Inside, the air was thick and heavy, carrying the scent of engine oil, burning plastic, and chemicals. The dim light filtering through cracks in the ceiling revealed a sprawling array of equipment throughout the large room. And right in the center, something froze him in his tracks. A row of high-tech machinery with biological masks laid out on a metal table. Grayson stepped closer, his eyes locked onto the intricate masks. Each one was crafted with perfect precision, every wrinkle, every contour on the face so lifelike it was almost terrifying. But what sent a chill down his spine more than anything was when he saw his own face recreated on one of those masks. He didn't need any more evidence. This was how Black Widow had framed Harper, and now, they were using the same trick to trap him. Someone had worn this biological mask, impersonated him, and committed the murder. Rex suddenly growled, making Grayson jump. The dog backed up, eyes fixed on a dark corner of the warehouse. A faint sound reached his ears, a barely audible footstep, almost impossible to detect. Grayson held his breath, quickly drawing his gun from his hip and aiming it toward the dark corner. "Come out if you don't want me to shoot you right here," his voice was low, sharp. There was no response. But then, a shadow slithered through a gap in the metal cabinet, trying to sneak toward the back door without making a sound. Without hesitation, Grayson fired a warning shot. The bullet slammed into the wall just inches from the figure, forcing him to stop. The man raised his hands slowly, turning to face Grayson. He was wearing a hoodie, his face half-lit and half-shadowed in the dim light. Grayson didn't know who he was, but the man knew exactly who he was. He smirked, his voice dripping with mockery. "You shouldn't have come here, Hayes." Before Grayson could react, the man suddenly threw something onto the floor, a smoke grenade. In an instant, white smoke billowed up, obscuring the entire room. Taking advantage of the cover, the man fled. Rex barked furiously, trying to chase after him, but Grayson held him back. The man was gone, but the evidence he left behind remained. Grayson's gaze fell to the table where the biological masks lay still. And he knew that, at last, he had the proof to uncover the truth. He looked down at Rex, the dog still growling warily. Grayson knelt, patting him gently on the head. "You saved me again, old friend," he murmured. But this wasn't over. If they had gone so far as to create these masks to set him up, then the people behind this were certainly planning something even worse. Grayson clenched his fist. The battle wasn't over yet. But at least this time, he wasn't alone. Rex had led him here, and he was certain the dog would lead him to the final truth. While Grayson and Ethan were searching for clues outside, Harper, the falsely accused police officer, was facing a battle of her own within the prison walls. Darkness enveloped the cold four walls of her cell, where Harper Calloway sat quietly on the stiff metal bed. The harsh yellow light from the overhead bulb cast reflections on the bars in front of her, creating long, wavering shadows on the cement floor. The air was thick with the smell of mold, rusted metal, and sweat, making it nearly suffocating. How many days had passed since she was brought here? She couldn't remember anymore. Time in prison didn't flow like it should. There were only two time frames, restless, nightmare-filled sleeps and the waking hours of captivity, when the bitter truth replayed itself in her mind like a broken record. Harper wasn't afraid of death, but she feared injustice. She had believed in the legal system, dedicated her life to fighting for justice. But now, the very system she had once defended had turned its back on her, cornering her with a death sentence. No one believed she was innocent. No one questioned the perfect evidence against her. She was just a pawn to be sacrificed in a game she never imagined being part of. But not everyone had turned away. There was still one who resisted, one who wouldn't let her be taken without a fight. Rex. At the thought of him, Harper gently closed her eyes, her hands instinctively gripping the thin, tattered blanket. She couldn't erase the image of Rex being dragged from the courtroom, his barking echoing in the air, filled with desperation and rage. He wouldn't accept this sentence, just as she wouldn't accept being framed. Rex was the only one who knew she was innocent. And that thought hurt more than anything else. Where was her dog now? Was he being treated well? Or had he been separated from the K-9 unit and locked away in some unknown place? Harper had never feared for herself, but she feared for Rex. He wasn't just any dog. He was a warrior, a companion, an irreplaceable part of her life. She remembered the early days of training Rex, when he was just a lively pup with bright, intelligent eyes and an unwavering loyalty. The day Rex passed his first evidence search test, she had embraced him, patted his head, and rewarded him with a treat. She remembered how proud he had looked, wagging his tail so hard he nearly knocked over her coffee cup on the table. But now, who would pat Rex on the head when it completed a task well? Who would tell him that he was the best dog in the world? The thought that Rex might be alone, confused, or worse, abandoned, made Harper want to scream. No. It can't be like that. She didn't believe Rex would be abandoned. But she feared that those behind this case wouldn't leave him alone. They knew Rex was her last connection to the truth. If they could eliminate Harper, would they let Rex survive? Her heart twisted at the image of Rex trapped in a strange cage, no one caring for him, no one understanding that he was aching, separated from her. She pictured him standing at the bars of the cage, his golden eyes staring out, waiting for her to return. But she wouldn't be able to, unless she found a way to escape this place. Harper clenched her fists. She couldn't let that happen. She had to find a way to fight, no matter how everything seemed to be against her. She couldn't let her life be taken unjustly. But more importantly, she couldn't leave Rex alone in this world, couldn't let him bear the pain of losing the only companion he trusted. She took a deep breath, trying to keep her mind clear. If there was one thing she had learned in her years as a cop, it was this: there was always a loophole. There was always a way to turn the tables. As long as she had time, and she had to find a way to claim it. Out there, no one might believe she was innocent. But there was one person fighting for her, a canine, a dog, a loyal companion. And for Rex, for herself, Harper knew she couldn't give up. The darkness in her cell was heavy, swallowing all the faint light from the hallway outside. Harper lay still on the cold metal bed, her eyes wide open, staring at the cracked ceiling. She had counted every day, every hour since her confinement. She had once believed in justice, once believed that the system she served would never turn its back on someone like her. But now, charged with a crime she didn't commit, she understood that sometimes the truth didn't matter as much as what the powerful wanted people to believe. The long nights in the cell had become an endless nightmare. No teammates to trust, no one to listen to her defense. But there was one thing Harper couldn't stop thinking about: Rex, her K-9, the only companion who never abandoned her, no matter how the world turned its back. She wondered what he was doing now, if he was being cared for or if he was locked away in some corner of a cage, lonely and confused like she was right now. Harper rolled over, trying to force herself to sleep, but her mind remained tangled in images of Rex. She remembered the days they had worked together, the times Rex had warned her before danger struck. If Rex were here, he would certainly be barking, not letting anyone come near her without a good reason. And just that thought made her more alert than ever. The sound of the cell door opening pulled Harper out of her thoughts. One of the guards stepped in, pushing a food tray through the small gap in the bars. She glanced at the tray, as usual, a bowl of cold soup, a piece of stale bread, and a plastic cup of clear water. It had been a long time since she cared about the taste of prison food. But today, something made her hesitate. A vague sense of unease crept over her, like Rex's instinct when he sensed an invisible danger. Harper picked up the tray and stared at the soup for a long while. She wasn't hungry, but the exhaustion from overthinking made her remind herself to eat a little to keep her strength up. Just as she was about to bring the spoon to her mouth, a voice broke the silence. "Not eating?" Harper turned to see Martha, the woman in the bed next to hers, glaring at her tray. Harper shrugged and put the spoon down. "Not hungry." Martha narrowed her eyes, then suddenly reached out and grabbed the tray. "Well, I'll take it then." Without waiting for a reply, Martha grabbed the soup bowl and took a big gulp. Harper didn't bother to protest, silently watching the woman chew the bread as if it were her last meal. And maybe it really was. Just a few minutes later, Martha began coughing. At first, it was light, but the intensity grew, violent enough to make her double over, hands clutching her throat. Harper immediately sensed something was wrong. "Martha?" She jumped up and moved closer, but Martha didn't answer. Her face turned pale, her eyes wide with terror as her breath became labored. In the blink of an eye, she collapsed onto the floor, frothing at the mouth, her body convulsing violently. Harper froze, her heart racing as she stared at the spilled food scattered on the floor. A terrifying truth began to form in her mind. Someone had tried to kill her. Outside, footsteps echoed rapidly. The guards, hearing the noise, rushed in. One of them bent down to check Martha's pulse, then turned to glare at Harper with suspicion. "What's going on here?" The guard's voice was cold. Harper stared at Martha's lifeless body, then slowly turned her gaze to the food tray still scattered on the floor. A chill ran down her spine. It should have been her. Harper swallowed hard, taking a deep breath to steady herself. She looked directly at the guard, her voice low but firm. "I don't know. She took my food, and then suddenly, this." The guard glanced at the other prisoners before signaling for the medical team to take Martha's body away. Harper remained still, a sense of dread filling her chest. This wasn't an accident. Nor was it a coincidence. Someone had tried to kill her. But who? And why? No, she didn't need to ask that question. She already knew the answer. Someone out there, maybe Vaughn, maybe Harrington, or maybe both, wanted her dead before she could prove her innocence. And what about Rex? Harper thought of her dog. If they wanted her silenced, would they find a way to do the same to Rex? The mere possibility made her blood boil. Rex had always protected her. And now, even though he wasn't by her side, it seemed like he was saving her once again. If not for thinking of Rex, she would have hesitated to eat that food. She clenched her fists. They thought she was weak, that being locked up here would make her an easy target. No. They were wrong. If they wanted to kill her quietly, she wouldn't give them a second chance. Harper looked out through the bars, past the endless hallway of the prison. She took a deep breath and whispered to herself. I won't let them win. Michael Harrington stood in the dimly lit office, the weak light casting shadows over his tense face. He sat motionless at his desk, slowly flipping through the pages of the file on the Harper Calloway case. Every word, every image inside was his doing, carefully fabricated evidence designed to frame her. But now, everything was starting to unravel. The phone on the desk suddenly vibrated. He glanced at the screen, knowing immediately who was calling. Taking a deep breath, Harrington answered, trying to maintain his calm voice. Listen up, Richard Vaughn's low voice came through the receiver, no greeting, just business. The situation's gone bad. Calloway's still alive, and Grayson's found something that could turn the case around. Harrington held his breath. Though he had anticipated this, hearing Vaughn confirm it sent a chill down his spine. What evidence? Harrington asked, his voice dry. A biological mask printer. Vaughn gritted his teeth. He found the place where they're made. And if he can connect it to the murders, everything we've planned will collapse. He can prove Harper Calloway was framed. Harrington could feel his heartbeat quickening. He knew how serious this was. If Grayson brought this evidence to light, not only would Vaughn be investigated, but he would too. All the years of manipulating evidence, covering up the Black Widow's tracks, would be exposed. What do we do? He asked, trying to keep his voice steady. Clean it up, Vaughn said slowly, each word like a cold knife slicing through the air. Calloway has to die immediately. Harrington gripped the phone tighter, his knuckles turning white. From the start, he had known that the time would come when Harper had to be eliminated. But he didn't expect it to happen so quickly. The original plan had been to keep her in prison long enough for the case to be forgotten, then stage an accident or some unusual death. But now, Vaughn was losing patience. I've tried twice already, Harrington said slowly, referring to the poisoning of Harper's food and the staged fight in prison that she was supposed to have died in. But she's too cautious. Then don't give her a chance, Vaughn interrupted, his voice cold. Her execution needs to be moved up. I've made all the arrangements. In the next 3 days, Harper Calloway will be executed. Harrington frowned. It won't be that easy. There are procedures to follow. You think I haven't accounted for that? Vaughn cut in, his voice carrying a veiled threat. I've spoken with the prison officials, and we have the approval. The reason? She's considered a potential threat. A killer like her doesn't deserve to live another day. Harrington swallowed hard. Vaughn was always a step ahead. And now, he had no choice but to follow along. But even with the plan perfectly laid out, he still felt something wasn't right. And Grayson? He asked. Vaughn chuckled darkly. He might have the evidence, but he won't have time. We just need to be faster than him. Harrington fell silent, his mind racing. If everything went smoothly, Harper Calloway would be dead before Grayson could present his evidence. But if something went wrong, if Grayson found a way to stop the execution. Are you worried? Vaughn asked, a hint of mockery in his tone. Harrington clenched his fist. No. I'll handle it. Then do it, Vaughn said, then hung up, not giving Harrington a chance to say another word. He placed the phone down on the desk, exhaling heavily. Despite being involved in countless schemes, this time, he felt an unusual unease. Calloway had never been an easy target. She'd survived previous assassination attempts. And Grayson, he had a feeling that man wasn't going to stop easily. He stood up, walked out of the office, and headed to another room in the police station. That was where he could control the flow of information on Harper. He needed to make sure the plan went smoothly, with no loose ends. But while Harrington was preoccupied with how to eliminate Harper before it was too late, he didn't realize that on the other side, Grayson was racing against time, and he wasn't fighting alone. Rex, with his sharp instincts, was already on the trail of the truth. And when this police dog picked up the scent of danger, he would not stop. Harper sat in the corner of the cramped cell, her hands tightly gripping her knees, her eyes fixed on the cold, lifeless wall in front of her. The news of her execution being moved up reached her through whispered conversations between the guards. She knew it wasn't a random decision by the justice system. It was a setup, a forced death to cover up all the evidence. Harper took a deep breath, trying to keep her mind sharp. She knew she couldn't wait for a miracle anymore. No one could save her. Grayson might be investigating, but if she didn't act, by the time he uncovered the truth, she'd be buried 6 feet under. She thought of Rex, the only one who had trusted her from day one. She imagined him barking furiously as she was led away from the courtroom, his low, painful growls echoing in her ears. She couldn't leave him. Rex was still out there, and she had to live to see him again. She had to escape. Harper had been watching the guards for days, memorizing their patrol routes, the blind spots in the security cameras, every little opening, no matter how small. But escaping from a maximum security prison wasn't just about patience. She needed chaos. She glanced through the bars, her eyes scanning the other inmates. Some were harmless, but there were those ready to incite violence given the right reason. She'd been a cop once. She understood how animals trapped in cages thought. Harper stood up and moved towards a group of prisoners gathered in the corner of the holding area. She took a deep breath, then shoved one of them, a large, heavily tattooed man she knew was always looking for a fight. "Get out of the way," he growled. Harper didn't back down. "I heard you're only good at threatening those weaker than you," she said, her tone calm but provocative. Instantly, a punch was thrown. Harper ducked to the side, the blow missing her and only making him angrier. The other prisoners turned their heads, realizing something was about to happen. A second later, the whole area exploded into chaos. Guards shouted. Alarms blared throughout the prison. And the cell doors swung open for the security forces to intervene. This was it. Harper sprinted towards the exit, dodging punches and weaving through the inmates locked in their struggles. She used the chaos to get closer to the hallway leading outside. Just as she reached the emergency exit, a guard lunged to block her way. There was no time to hesitate. Harper landed a punch straight to his throat, then quickly snatched the security badge from his belt. Not stopping, she burst through the door, slamming into another hallway, and ran straight for the prison parking lot. Outside, headlights swept across the area. Alarms echoed through the air, and police sirens screamed in the distance. The patrol team had been alerted. Harper spotted a police car parked nearby, the door still open, a cop was stepping out. She had no choice. Harper charged, landing a kick to the officer's knee, sending him crumpling to the ground. Without a second thought, she jumped into the driver's seat, yanked the gearshift, and slammed the accelerator. The car roared to life, racing through the gates as bullets rang out behind her. But she knew she couldn't run far. The police would track her down by any means necessary. She needed an escape route. Across town, Grayson was going through some files when his phone buzzed. A close informant reported that Harper had escaped from prison. His heart pounded. He knew what this meant. Harper had realized they were going to kill her, and she had no choice but to flee. But if she ran without a solid plan, the police would catch her again, or worse, they'd kill her the moment they found her. Grayson sprang to his feet, glancing over at Rex. The dog seemed just as tense, as if sensing something was wrong. "We have to go now," Grayson said, hurriedly gathering the files. Back to Harper's escape. She gripped the steering wheel tightly, her heart pounding in her chest. Her eyes darted to the rearview mirror, where the flashing red lights of the police were barely visible in the distance, gaining on her with terrifying speed. Cold sweat ran down her temples, but she couldn't stop. There was no turning back. This was her only chance to keep her life. If she was caught this time, there would be no chance to clear her name. The police car sped down the dark road, the trees lining the sides blurring past like ghostly shadows. The quiet of the suburbs was shattered by the blaring siren. She tried to calculate, looking for a possible escape route, but before she could react, the blinding headlights from ahead forced her to squint instinctively. Her instincts screamed. An SUV blocked the road ahead, cutting off the only route she could take. Harper gritted her teeth and slammed the brakes. The tires screeched, sliding across the asphalt with an agonizing sound. She gripped her gun at her side, knowing this wouldn't be an easy confrontation. Everything fell into a brief moment of silence before a familiar sound echoed through the night. A bark came from the distance. Harper whipped around, her heart tightening as she saw the familiar figures at the end of the street. Grayson was standing there. And right beside him was Rex. The dog barked loudly, his eyes bright in the dark, his tail wagging slightly but his body taut, ready to leap into action at any moment. She couldn't believe her eyes. Amidst the chase, amidst all the chaos, one thing remained unchanged: Rex was still there. Still trusting her. Still ready to protect her, as he had from the very beginning. A powerful wave of emotion surged in Harper's chest. She wanted to run to them, to embrace Rex, to hear Grayson tell her everything would be all right. But the brutal reality was far more unforgiving. The police cars surrounded her from all sides. The headlights swept across the road, and the stern voices of the officers crackled through loudspeakers. "Harper Calloway, put down your weapon and raise your hands." Harper froze, the weight of hopelessness pressing down on her. She had been so close to freedom, yet it felt so far away. Rex kept barking, struggling to break free from Grayson's grip, as if he believed he could run to her and pull her out of this. Grayson was tense, his gaze locking with Harper's for a brief moment, as if silently promising he wouldn't let her go alone. But Harper understood. She couldn't escape from here. Not right now. She slowly took a step back, her eyes lingering on Grayson and Rex one last time, just a subtle nod, an unspoken signal that only he would understand. "Go." Grayson clenched his fist. He knew what that meant. She didn't want him to risk himself, didn't want Rex to get hurt. But in that glance, he also saw a promise, that this was not the end. Harper raised her hands, her gaze still fixed on her loyal dog. Rex barked louder, his legs freezing when he saw the officers swarm toward her, restraining her and slapping the handcuffs on. Grayson had to hold Rex back, his hand gripping the dog's collar, but he couldn't stop the painful whine that escaped the animal. Rex struggled, trying to break free, as though his small heart couldn't accept the truth that Harper was being taken from him once again. Harper closed her eyes, taking a deep breath. She didn't know what fate awaited her, but one thing she was sure of: Grayson wouldn't abandon her. And Rex would keep fighting for her in his own way. Grayson clenched his fist, watching Harper's figure fade behind the police cars. No. This wasn't the end. If they wanted to bury Harper, he would be the one to pull her back into the light. And this time, he wouldn't let her fight alone. Harper was not taken back to the prison as she had anticipated. When the handcuffs tightened around her wrists and the police escorted her off the street, she realized the destination wasn't the prison, but another road, darker and quieter. A sense of unease crept into her mind, but she kept her composure. They hadn't read the arrest warrant, nor had they informed anyone about her capture. There could only be one reason for this. This wasn't a formal arrest. The car drove through empty streets beyond the city's borders. Harper glanced out the window, trying to remember every sign on the road. The faint light from the broken streetlights flickered across her face, reflecting in her cold eyes. She knew what awaited her ahead. And it wasn't anything like what she had experienced in jail. The prison had rules. Laws. But now, she was being taken to a place where the law no longer existed. Finally, the car stopped in front of an old industrial area, where dim lights from a few malfunctioning street lamps only made the place feel more eerie. The door opened, and one of the officers yanked Harper out. She didn't resist, but her eyes quickly scanned the area, looking for any chance to escape. Old buildings. Rusty containers stacked on top of each other. This wasn't a police station. Not a prison. This was a secret place where people could vanish without anyone ever knowing. A deep voice echoed from the shadows. "Take her inside." Harper recognized the voice immediately. Richard Vaughn. She was pushed into an abandoned warehouse. The only light came from a single hanging bulb, casting shadows over the dirty concrete floor. In the center of the room was an old iron table, and Vaughn stood beside it, dressed in a tailored suit, a faint, calculating smile on his lips. "Calloway," he said, his voice low but laced with amusement. "You've impressed me. Not many people can break out of prison and still survive to be caught again." Harper didn't respond. She just looked at him with cold, sharp eyes. He didn't need her to answer. He only wanted to show that he was in control. Vaughn stepped closer, placing both hands on the table, studying her with a hint of curiosity. "What do you know?" he asked, his voice calm yet threatening. Harper smirked. "I don't know what you're talking about." Vaughn chuckled, but the smile didn't reach his eyes. "You see, I really like people with strong wills. But even the strongest have limits." He gestured, and one of his men stepped forward, roughly forcing Harper to sit in a chair. Another man fastened her hands to the armrests with thick ropes, tightening them until her skin turned raw. "You've been digging into things that don't belong to you," Vaughn continued, pacing around Harper like a predator eyeing its prey. "Grayson and your dog have been digging through evidence too. And I have no doubt that you know about what they found." Harper stayed silent, but inside, her stomach twisted. They knew Grayson was on her trail. She wasn't afraid for herself, she had prepared for the worst. But if Vaughn knew about Grayson, it meant he was in danger too. And Rex, her loyal dog, was still out there, fighting to clear her name. The thought of it made her stronger. Vaughn tilted his head, as if reading her mind. "You're thinking about Grayson and your loyal dog, aren't you?" "I've been thinking about them too. But unlike you, I know how to end this." Harper narrowed her eyes, a chill running down her spine. "This is how it ends," Vaughn continued, his voice lowering. "You'll tell me everything you know. You'll help me clean up the mess you've made. If not," he paused, letting the weight of his words sink in. "Tomorrow will be your last day." Harper knew this wasn't an empty threat. Vaughn had enough power to push for her execution on the spot. If he couldn't silence her with threats, he would kill her without hesitation. She raised her head, meeting his gaze. "You can kill me, but you won't be able to kill the truth." Vaughn stared at her for a long moment before chuckling again. "Do you really think justice will win, Calloway?" He leaned down, whispering, "Justice is something created by the strong." Harper didn't respond. She didn't need to. She knew that no matter how much Vaughn tried to imprison her, no matter how close she was to the edge, there was one person who would never give up. Rex. Her dog had never betrayed her trust. If anyone could help Grayson find the truth, it was him. Harper looked at Vaughn, no longer afraid. "You can imprison me," she said slowly. "But you can't stop what's coming." Vaughn sneered. "We'll see," he gestured, and one of his guards stepped forward, placing a cloth bag over Harper's head, pulling it tight. Everything plunged into darkness. Grayson and Ethan sat in a small room temporarily used as the central investigation hub. Bulletin boards were covered in documents and diagrams, connecting key figures within the Black Widow organization. But right now, the only thing Grayson could focus on was the phone on the table, where second by second, he awaited news from his close sources. Something wasn't right. Harper had been captured, that much was clear. But theoretically, she should have been taken back to the prison, logged into the system as a captured escapee. However, for hours, there had been no official announcement regarding her return to jail. Ethan leaned over the table, his eyes fixed on the laptop screen. "I've checked the inmate tracking system. There's no sign of Harper being brought back to the prison." Grayson clenched his fists. This was what he feared the most. Harper hadn't been taken back to prison. So where had they taken her? Without hesitation, he knew there was only one possible scenario. They had no intention of letting her live. He stood up abruptly, his eyes darkening. "They want to kill her." Ethan nodded, his voice dropping. "And this time, there's nothing stopping them. This couldn't happen. If Black Widow was involved, they wouldn't make a mistake. They would eliminate Harper the moment they had the chance." There was no time to hesitate. Grayson pulled out his phone, quickly scrolling through his contacts. There was only one person who could help him now, Jake Carter, one of the few officers he still trusted in the police force. After a few rings, a gravelly voice came through the line. "Grayson? What's going on this late?" "Harper's not at the prison," Grayson said flatly. "I need to know where she is." A silence lingered on the other end of the line. Jake wasn't the type to show emotion easily, but Grayson could feel his hesitation. "Listen," Jake said, his voice dropping lower. "I can't say much over the phone. But I have what you need." Grayson tightened his grip on the phone. "Say it." Jake took a deep breath, then whispered, as if he feared someone might be eavesdropping. "I planted a tracker on Harper before she was taken. Just in case. I didn't expect to actually need it." Grayson felt his heart race. "Do you have the coordinates?" "I do. But we have to move fast. If I can track her, Vaughn's people can find out what I've done." Ethan looked at Grayson expectantly. There was no time to waste. Grayson grabbed his coat and hurried toward the door. "Send me the coordinates now. I'll handle the rest." Jake sighed. "Be careful. We're dealing with people who won't hesitate to kill." Grayson hung up, and almost immediately, a message with the coordinates appeared on his screen. Ethan glanced at the phone, then quickly opened the map on his laptop. This isn't a police station nor an official facility. It's an abandoned industrial area about 30 miles outside the city. Grayson gritted his teeth. "We leave now." Ethan nodded, closed the laptop, and followed Grayson to the car. Just as Grayson was about to open the driver's side door, a soft noise came from behind him. When he turned, he saw Rex standing there, his eyes glowing in the darkness, his tail flicking slightly. The dog had heard everything. Grayson bent down and placed his hand on Rex's head. "I know you want to go," he whispered. "But this could be dangerous." Rex just looked at him, not blinking, as if he understood that nothing could change his mind. Ethan stood beside them, arms crossed. "You really think you can leave him behind? He knows something's about to happen." Grayson remained silent, gazing down at Rex with a thoughtful expression. He fully understood the dog's condition. The injury from the previous pursuit wasn't completely healed, though it appeared stable on the surface. But more than anyone else, Grayson knew Rex wasn't just any ordinary working dog. He didn't simply obey commands like a regular animal. He had extraordinary instincts, an intuition that even seasoned officers found hard to compare with. The most crucial pieces of evidence in this investigation had all come from Rex, from tracking the criminal's trail to discovering a strange piece of material at the crime scene. Everything had his paw prints on it. Without Rex, Grayson and Ethan might still be grappling with scattered theories, unable to connect the critical details needed to uncover the truth. His sharp instincts weren't by chance. They had been honed over years of cases, chases, and confrontations with criminals. But above all, Rex was a loyal warrior. He wasn't just a partner. He was a core part of the team's very soul. Grayson took a deep breath. He had witnessed working dogs like Rex fight until their last breath to protect their partners. Their loyalty wasn't just animal instinct, it was an unbreakable vow. And now, even though he wasn't fully recovered, Rex still wanted to join the fight, not because of the instinct to hunt, but because he knew Harper was in danger. He could sense it in a way that humans couldn't. Grayson knelt down and placed a hand on Rex's head. The dog's breath was steady and strong, without a hint of worry or fear. Rex's eyes gleamed in the darkness, unwavering, as though waiting for Grayson's final decision. Grayson knew he couldn't stop him. If he left Rex behind, the dog wouldn't sit quietly. Instead, he would stew in frustration, whining and staring longingly at the door, as if blaming Grayson for abandoning him in a critical battle. And deep down, Grayson knew it was true. Part of him wanted Rex to come along. He trusted him more than anyone else. Finally, he nodded slightly. "All right. Let's go." Rex jumped into the back seat with swift agility, his eyes filled with determination. He knew his mission. He knew Harper was still out there. And he wouldn't stop until he found her. The car sped off, racing through the night toward the last known location where Harper had been taken. A race against time had begun. And Grayson swore, this time, he wouldn't let her fight alone. Grayson and Ethan drove through the night, closely following the GPS signal that Grayson's trusted police contact had placed on Harper. Every road, every corner that passed by was met with silence. The atmosphere in the car was tense, as tight as a stretched wire. Both of them knew that with every passing second, they were getting closer to Harper, but they were also getting closer to an unpredictable danger. Rex sat in the back seat, ears upright, eyes never leaving the road ahead. Though it didn't understand the flashing numbers on the GPS screen, it knew something important was about to happen. It sensed Grayson's tension and was ready for it. Finally, the car came to a stop by an old industrial area where a dilapidated warehouse stood amid abandoned shipping containers. The GPS indicated Harper was inside, but even more surprising was the lack of heavy security in the area. Ethan furrowed his brows, whispering, "Are they not careful?" Grayson squinted, scanning the dark area in front of him. There were only 2 guards standing outside, casually chatting, their rifles hanging loosely on their shoulders. This was far from what he had imagined. A high-profile prisoner like Harper should have been heavily guarded, not left with only 2 guards like this. But that also meant Vaughn was either overly confident, or too foolish to think no one could track him down this quickly. Grayson exchanged a look with Ethan and then subtly nodded toward Rex. The dog immediately understood. It dropped to the ground and began to move forward silently, like a shadow. Grayson followed suit, drawing his knife from his belt. Ethan came behind, his gun held firmly in his hand, ready to back them up if things went sideways. The 2 guards had no idea that in mere seconds, they would have no chance to alert anyone. Rex moved through the darkness like a phantom, its eyes glowing, focused on the target. Just a few more steps, and it suddenly surged forward, launching itself like a bolt of lightning. Before the first guard could react, Rex had lunged at him, its sharp teeth sinking into his arm, making his gun drop to the ground. He didn't have time to scream before Grayson reached him, landing a powerful punch to the back of his neck, knocking him out cold. The second guard spun around, mouth open in shock, but Ethan was faster. A precise strike to the throat left the man choking, unable to make a sound. Before he could back away, Grayson grabbed him by the neck, tightening his grip until the guard's body went limp. In just a few seconds, both guards were motionless on the ground. No gunshots. No screams. Grayson knelt down, gently patting Rex's head, whispering, "Good job, old friend." Rex didn't bark. It only exhaled deeply, eyes still locked on the warehouse door, as if it knew the mission wasn't over yet. Grayson glanced at Ethan and nodded. "Let's go." They carefully dragged the two guards into the shadows, disarmed them, and quickly moved toward the large door. There was no one else around. Inside the warehouse, Harper remained bound to the chair, her wounds bleeding, yet her eyes still shone with an unyielding resolve. She had no idea that just a few steps away, the only people she could trust were drawing closer than ever. And Vaughn, still holding the gun to her head, was entirely unaware that his time was running out. The air inside the warehouse was thick with the scent of dampness and old machine oil, the faint light from the overhead bulbs flickering, casting twisted shadows on the walls. Harper was tightly bound to an old wooden chair, her wrists swollen and raw from the ropes cutting into her skin. The wound on her forehead still leaked blood, but her gaze never wavered, showing no hint of fear. In front of her, Richard Vaughn stood, the pistol aimed directly at her head, his finger dangerously hovering over the trigger. Richard Vaughn stood before her, his eyes cold and piercing, his face showing no sign of fatigue despite hours of interrogation. He had tried everything, threats, beatings, mental torture, but the woman before him refused to speak a single word about what she knew. Harper lifted her head, her body drained but her eyes burned with a terrifying determination. A faint smile curled on her bruised lips, and Vaughn's expression twisted into a frown. "Is something funny, Calloway?" he snarled, his voice thick with impatience. Harper tilted her head, her voice rough with pain but steady. "I was just wondering, how long do you think you'll live after you kill me?" Vaughn raised an eyebrow, and then let out a laugh. "You still don't understand your situation, do you?" He bent down, staring directly into her eyes. "You have no one. No one out there is looking for you. You've been abandoned." Harper stayed silent for a moment, her eyes locked with Vaughn's, as if considering something. Then she exhaled slowly, shaking her head. "You're wrong. I know there's one person who will never abandon me." Vaughn sneered and turned away. "You mean Grayson? He won't be able to save you. And even if he tries, he'll be dead before he ever finds you." Harper said nothing, but deep inside, hope still burned brightly. She knew Grayson wouldn't give up. But the thing that reassured her the most was Rex. That dog had never left her side. And she knew that even though he wasn't here now, somewhere out there, he was fighting to find her. Vaughn sighed, his patience finally slipping away. He had thought Harper would break after hours of torture, but no, she still stared at him with that same unflinching gaze, as though he were nothing but a failed man grasping at something meaningless. "You know, Calloway," Vaughn said with a smirk, "I actually admire your stubbornness. But this is the end," he grinned, pushing the gun even closer to her head. Just as he was about to pull the trigger, a shadow shot forward like lightning. A high-pitched scream shattered the silence as Rex lunged at Vaughn from the side, sinking his sharp teeth into the arm holding the gun. Vaughn roared in pain, his grip faltering on the gun as a shot rang out, but it missed its target. Harper jerked instinctively, but she remained bound to the chair. Vaughn struggled frantically to shake Rex off, but the dog wouldn't let go, its teeth buried deep in his arm, blood soaking through his sleeve. He screamed, kicking viciously at Rex, sending the dog flying across the room. The dog slammed hard against the floor, rolling several times before coming to a stop. It let out a low growl but struggled to rise, its eyes glaring at Vaughn in defiance. Grayson and Ethan didn't miss their chance. Grayson shot out of his cover, gun raised high, aimed straight at Vaughn. "Drop the gun," he barked, his voice firm. Vaughn, despite his bloodied arm, refused to yield. He staggered to his feet, reaching for the gun that had fallen to the floor. In that moment, despite the pain from old and new wounds, Rex surged forward once again. This time, it went straight for the gun Vaughn was desperately trying to grab. With the power of a trained working dog, Rex leaped and slammed into Vaughn's arm, sending the gun flying out of his reach. It skidded across the concrete floor, stopping a few meters away. Vaughn cursed, scrambling to crawl toward the weapon, but Rex wouldn't let him. In an instant, the dog turned, growling and lunging at Vaughn again, its teeth sinking into his shoulder and dragging him to the floor. The pain made Vaughn scream, his fists pounding on Rex in desperation, but the dog held firm, its front paws pinning him down, keeping him immobilized. Vaughn, in desperation, reached for the knife at his side, but Grayson was faster. He rushed forward, kicking Vaughn's hand, sending the knife flying away. Without hesitation, Grayson raised the butt of his gun and slammed it hard against Vaughn's temple. Vaughn staggered, his eyes bulging before he collapsed, unable to fight back. Only then did Rex release its grip, though it stayed alert, still growling and ready to strike again if Vaughn showed any signs of movement. Outside, the blaring sirens of the police and FBI echoed, their flashing lights illuminating the old warehouse. Dozens of agents poured in, surrounding the entire area, weapons drawn and ready. There was no escape for Vaughn now. Staggering back, blood from his shoulder wound soaking his shirt, he knew it was over. One officer rushed forward, forcing him to the ground before quickly securing handcuffs around his wrists. Vaughn, his will shattered, could no longer resist. His wild eyes locked onto Harper as if trying to memorize her face one last time before being led away. Harper sat motionless in the chair, her body bruised and broken from the relentless torture. She no longer had the strength to react, but in her tired eyes, there remained an unwavering resolve. As Grayson knelt to untie her, she turned her head to look at Vaughn for the final time, her voice hoarse yet sharp as a blade cut through the tense air. "I always knew you'd have to pay for this, Vaughn." Vaughn gritted his teeth, but no words came. He knew it was over for him. But Harper no longer cared about him. As the last rope was cut, her exhausted body collapsed forward, and Grayson quickly caught her. But then, a soft groan from nearby caught her attention. Harper turned, her breath catching in her throat as the sight before her stopped her dead in her tracks. Rex lay just a short distance away, his body covered in wounds. His fur was matted with blood, but his loyal eyes never left Harper's. Throughout her captivity, she had feared she'd never see her dog again. But now, there he was, right before her. Rex. Her voice was weak, barely a whisper, but Rex responded immediately. He tried to lift his head, his eyes glowing with concern, checking to see if she was injured. Then, despite his own exhaustion, he dragged himself closer, gently resting his head on Harper's lap. The familiar warmth of his presence broke something inside Harper. Tears welled up, falling onto Rex's blood-soaked fur. She reached out, trembling, and stroked the matted, bloodied coat. "Old friend, you did so well." Rex couldn't speak, but he wagged his tail gently, as if to say he understood. He was still there, by her side, despite everything they'd both been through. Grayson stood quietly nearby, watching the scene unfold. This was not just a reunion, it was a testament to an unbreakable loyalty. He knew what Harper and Rex had been through, and he knew that the dog had risked everything to bring her back. Ethan approached, kneeling beside Rex to check his wounds. "He's lost a lot of blood," he muttered. "We need to get him to a vet immediately." Grayson nodded but didn't move. He kept his eyes on Harper, seeing the way her hands still trembled as they rested on Rex's back. He understood what she was feeling, the knowledge that, despite the world turning its back on her, there was still one being who would never abandon her. Harper took a deep breath, trying to steady her emotions. She placed her hand on Rex's head, gently stroking him as she always had when he performed his duty with excellence. "You saved me," she whispered. "You've always found me first." Rex exhaled softly, nudging his head against her hand. Grayson knelt beside her, placing a reassuring hand on her shoulder. "We'll get him somewhere safe. Right now." Harper nodded, but she didn't rise immediately. She wanted to stay with Rex just a little longer. After all the days spent in captivity, tortured and stripped of everything she knew, with a single gentle touch from her dog, that she still had the most important thing, his unwavering loyalty. Ethan stood up first, signaling to the agents to prepare an ambulance for Rex. Grayson helped Harper to her feet, but even as she stood, her eyes remained on her dog. "Let's go, old friend," she whispered. Rex didn't have the strength to stand on his own, but with Grayson's help, he managed to take a few slow steps. Every movement pained him, but he never looked away from Harper. He had found her. He had fulfilled his mission. Outside, the police and FBI vehicles still blazed with lights, but now, all attention was on Harper and Rex. No one spoke, but everyone understood what they had just witnessed. It was not merely a rescue. It was the story of loyalty, the unbreakable bond between a woman and a creature who had risked its life to protect the one it loved. After Vaughn's arrest, the FBI launched an extensive investigation to dismantle the entire Black Widow organization. Raids took place continuously across multiple areas, from secret bases to covert business fronts. The organization's financial and communication records were thoroughly examined, and a series of new names emerged. Agents followed the trail, scouring every corner to bring each individual involved to light. Outside the hospital, the sunlight shone brightly, but Harper couldn't feel its warmth. She lay in the hospital bed, her arm wrapped in bandages, her old wounds still healing. But her mind was elsewhere. Out there, the FBI was conducting the largest raid she had ever witnessed, a sweeping operation targeting those who had attempted to manipulate justice, exploiting the system for their own gain. One by one, they were brought into the light. The secret Black Widow bases were uncovered and dismantled. Every hidden bank account, every illicit fund funneled into black market channels, was traced and frozen immediately. Those who thought they could escape, the corrupt officers who had believed they would always be safe in the organization's shadow, now found themselves handcuffed and loaded into police vehicles. The special task force worked tirelessly, each report sent back to the command center. And with everyone, the list of arrests grew longer. Harper knew this was the first time in years that the justice system had truly stood a chance against such a powerful underground force. She had once thought she would never live to see this day. But none of that mattered as much as one thing. She was free. The news reached her early one morning. An agent entered her hospital room, carrying a thick file and a slight smile on his face. "Miss Calloway, I think you'll want to hear this from us personally. You've been completely exonerated. The evidence from Vaughn's arrest, along with the materials gathered during the Black Widow raid, proves that you had no involvement in any of the murders. You were the victim of a carefully orchestrated plot. And now, you are free." Harper didn't immediately feel the joy she had waited for. This moment had come to her so long, but now that it had arrived, she felt empty. She had fought, run, and endured both physical and emotional wounds to uncover the truth. And now, she wasn't sure what to do next. But then, a single thought broke through the fog. Rex. "Where's Rex?" Her voice was hoarse, her eyes flashing with concern. "How is he?" The agent hesitated for a moment before replying. "We took him to a vet after the rescue. The dog was pretty badly injured, but he's past the critical stage. He's still being monitored." Harper couldn't wait another second. She threw the blanket off, despite the bruises still aching across her body. Harper stood at the threshold of the treatment room, her hand gripping the doorframe tightly as she gazed at her loyal dog lying motionless on the medical bed. White bandages wrapped around Rex's shoulders and front legs, dried blood staining his dark brown fur, and wounds covering his body, each one a reminder of the battle he had fought for her. Her throat tightened. She had seen Rex injured before during dangerous missions, but she had never seen him like this, weak, exhausted, yet still full of life. Her footsteps echoed softly in the quiet room as Harper approached. Rex's ears twitched and his eyes slowly opened, a familiar, deep gaze reflected his unwavering loyalty. He tried to lift his head, but the pain made him let out a low groan. Harper immediately knelt beside him, her trembling hand reaching out to gently touch his fur. "Hey, boy," she whispered, her voice thick with emotion. Rex let out a soft groan, then tried to raise himself slightly, licking Harper's hand as if to make sure she was truly here, truly safe. She bit her lip, feeling the familiar warmth of him, and for that moment, everything around her seemed to fade away. Grayson stood leaning against the wall, his arms crossed, silently observing. He understood Harper better than anyone, and he knew she wasn't just looking at an injured working dog. She was looking at a comrade, the only friend who hadn't abandoned her, even when the whole world had turned its back on her. "I guess you've heard about what he did," Grayson spoke up, his voice quiet. Harper kept her gaze fixed on Rex but gave a slight nod. "I know he saved me. But I don't know the details." Grayson sighed, walked over, and sat down in the chair beside the bed. "After you were captured, Rex never left me. He didn't eat, didn't sleep. He was always looking toward the door, like he was waiting for you to come back. And when Ethan and I found out that Black Widow hadn't given up on eliminating you, Rex was the first to notice we were being watched." Harper glanced at Grayson, her eyes flickering with concern. "You were ambushed?" Grayson nodded. "We were chased down the street, but Rex saved me. He lunged at one of the assassins, throwing him off balance and giving me the opportunity to take him down. But the price he paid," he nodded towards the bandages covering Rex's body. Harper swallowed, then bent down again to stroke Rex's soft fur. "You saved me again," she said quietly. "Just like always." Rex blinked, his tail giving a slight wag despite his exhausted body. Grayson continued, his voice darkening. "After you were taken to Vaughn's warehouse, we tracked the device a close cop had placed on you. But without Rex, we wouldn't have been able to get close so easily. He spotted the 2 guards outside before they could alert anyone, and he helped us break in without making a sound." Harper looked at Grayson in surprise. "He did all that, even though he was injured?" Grayson smiled faintly. "He never stopped fighting, Harper. For you." Harper took a deep breath, her eyes flashing with new determination. She turned back to Rex, gently resting her forehead against his head. "You've endured too much already, old friend," she whispered. Rex let out a low groan, his eyes half closed, but in that moment, Harper knew he understood her words. Grayson stood up and placed a hand on Harper's shoulder. "He'll recover. So will you. But we can't stop here. Black Widow isn't completely wiped out yet." Harper clenched her fist. "They've taken too much. But they won't get another chance." Grayson nodded. "Then let's start from here. And this time, we won't give them the chance to strike back." Harper looked at Rex one last time. She knew the battle wasn't over, but at least here and now, she and Rex had found each other again. And that alone was enough for her to keep fighting. Memories flooded back, vivid as if Harper were reliving every moment from the past. The day she first met Rex, a young working dog with bright, eager eyes, full of passion but also stubborn and headstrong. When she was tasked with training Rex, Harper thought it would be incredibly difficult to control such a strong-willed and tenacious dog. What she didn't expect, however, was that in the end, Rex wouldn't just become a partner, but the only family she had. She remembered the first time they went to a crime scene together. At that point, Rex wasn't fully accustomed to real combat situations, but he quickly learned, adapting and reacting faster than any teammate Harper had worked with. She clearly recalled the day Rex first demonstrated his exceptional skills. During a drug bust, as the team approached the abandoned building, Rex suddenly growled, pulling hard on his leash toward a side door. Harper felt something wasn't right and immediately ordered the team to change position. Just seconds later, a criminal emerged from a hidden corner, a knife in his hand. But before he could approach, Rex shot forward like lightning, bringing him down in an instant. The sight left everyone stunned, a young working dog with an incredible instinct for protection. Harper smiled as she recalled the tough training days, the early morning runs on the field, the many times they practiced in simulated scenario drills. Not everything had gone smoothly. She remembered the time Rex refused to jump over the high obstacle wall. Despite numerous attempts, he just stood there, staring at her, then turned his head away as though protesting. Harper had to be patient, sitting quietly beside him, petting him and encouraging him bit by bit. Then, one hot afternoon, Rex unexpectedly gathered himself and leaped over the wall, catching Harper by surprise. In that moment, she realized something: Rex wasn't just learning from her. He also needed her by his side, to trust and accompany him. Harper looked down at her hand resting on Rex's back, the familiar feeling of his thick fur bringing her a sense of peace. This dog had saved her countless times. But perhaps the memory she would never forget was the day Rex risked his life to protect her from an ambush. At the time, they were chasing a dangerous assassin, a man responsible for a series of brutal murders. As they approached an abandoned warehouse, Harper had an uneasy feeling, but she couldn't back down. Suddenly, Rex barked loudly, pulling hard on the leash, causing her to freeze. In the next moment, a barrage of bullets rained down on the spot where she had been about to step. If it hadn't been for Rex, she wouldn't have made it out alive. In that instant, Harper knew that what existed between her and Rex wasn't just the bond between a handler and a working dog. It was something deeper, an unshakable loyalty. Harper bowed her head, her chest tightening as she thought of the past days, the days she was imprisoned, tortured both physically and mentally, and abandoned by the world. But even as everyone turned their back on her, even as justice was distorted, there was one creature that never changed. Rex. He didn't just fight for her. He had trusted her even when the whole world turned its back on her. Without Rex, she might not have been able to stand here, breathing the air of freedom. "Sorry for making you worry," Harper whispered, her voice hoarse from exhaustion and emotion. She knew Rex didn't need an apology. To him, she had never been at fault. No matter how the world turned against her, no matter how she was judged, hunted, or falsely accused, Rex had always trusted her completely. That was what made their bond more special than anything else. Rex let out a low whine, trying to nudge closer, pressing his head into Harper's palm. She gently stroked him, feeling his warm breath against her skin. Just that alone was enough to ease the wounds in her heart. Grayson stood quietly by the door, watching silently. His gaze softened as he observed this moment. He had worked with many K-9 units, seen many excellent working dogs, but he had never encountered a dog quite like Rex. There were things that couldn't be trained. Things that couldn't be forced. Absolute loyalty. And an unbreakable bond. Harper sat there for a long time, her hand never leaving Rex, listening to his steady breathing. She knew her fight wasn't over, that there was still much to be done, many wrongs yet to be righted. But at least in this moment, she knew she wasn't alone. She had lost everything, her reputation, her career, her faith in justice. But there was still Rex. And it was his presence that reminded her that she had to keep fighting, not only to restore justice for herself but also to protect those who couldn't protect themselves. Harper took a deep breath, lightly brushing the top of Rex's head, and whispered. "We won't let them get away, old friend." All the names linked to the Black Widow organization were exposed and arrested. However, there was still one who slipped through the cracks, Michael Harrington. As a senior police officer, Harrington not only had vast connections but also a deep understanding of how the investigative system operated. Throughout his career at the police department, he had secretly protected Black Widow from previous investigations, manipulating evidence and eliminating threats to the organization. He wasn't just an accomplice to the crime. He was a part of the machinery itself, a figure in the shadows, controlling everything like a skillful puppeteer. With his knowledge of the investigative process, he knew exactly what he needed to do to avoid being discovered. The FBI raided Harrington's residence, but all they found was an empty apartment. The computers were completely destroyed, and the documents were burned to ashes. There were no traces left, as if he had never lived there. A few of his secret bank accounts were frozen, but the money had been withdrawn not long before. Harrington had prepared in advance, knowing that he would become the next target the moment Vaughn fell. A man like him wouldn't simply run. He would plan, find a way to hide, or even attempt a counterattack. This made Grayson feel uneasy. But what was even more suspicious was how he vanished. The last images the police obtained from security cameras showed him leaving the house, looking like a completely different person. His face was no longer Michael Harrington's, it was a middle-aged stranger, not found in any identification records. There were no signs of a rushed plastic surgery. No way he could have changed his appearance so quickly. That was when Grayson realized, Harrington had used a biological polymer mask. The very technology Black Widow had used to frame Harper. Not only had he manipulated Harper's case, but he had also used that very technology to hide his own identity. This was something no one had anticipated. A man who could wear any face, blending into the crowd without anyone noticing. The hunt for Harrington became more challenging than ever. If he could change his appearance in an instant, how could they possibly find him among millions of people? In the days that followed, the FBI searched for him everywhere, but every attempt ended in dead ends. He left no trace, didn't use his old identity, and didn't contact anyone within the organization. But Grayson didn't believe that Harrington could completely vanish. A man like him wouldn't just withdraw. He still had a purpose, still had plans of his own. The most important question was Harrington running, or was he still around, waiting for an opportunity? While the FBI intensified their investigation, Rex, with the instincts of a trained K-9, acted first. Despite his injuries not fully healing, he stayed close to Harper, always on high alert. One morning, while Harper was going over the investigation reports, Rex suddenly jumped from his spot, lunging towards the window and barking loudly. This wasn't his usual reaction. Sensing something was wrong, Grayson quickly rushed outside to the yard, where Rex was running in circles, sniffing the ground as if trying to track a scent. A thought suddenly flashed through Harper's mind. If they couldn't track down Harrington with facial recognition technology, why not use his scent? People could change their appearance, but they couldn't completely hide their biological traces, body odor, sweat, pheromones. All of these elements couldn't be tricked by a mask. And if anyone could track down Harrington, no matter who he was disguised as, it was Rex. Harper immediately took action, thinking that he might still be hiding nearby, because the most dangerous place was often the safest. She had Rex sniff the old belongings the police had found. Rex reacted strongly, barking loudly before darting towards a nearby alley, constantly sniffing along the path. Harper followed closely, keeping pace with Rex's quick steps. Rex showed no hesitation, its ears perked up, muscles tensed as it led Harper through narrow alleyways. The scent it was following was still fresh, indicating that Harrington was very close. Harper scanned the crowd, trying to spot anyone acting suspiciously. But what made this pursuit so dangerous was Harrington's ability to change his appearance. He could be standing right in front of her, but with a completely different face. Rex suddenly stopped in front of a food stall on the side of the road and headed straight for a man in a brown coat who was hurriedly moving through the crowd with his head lowered. In an instant, Harper noticed the unusual behavior. He wasn't looking around, wasn't watching his surroundings, almost as if he wanted to leave as quickly as possible. Her hand quickly reached for her gun, and she picked up her pace, staying right behind him. "Stop!" Harper shouted, drawing her gun from its holster. The crowd startled, turning to look, murmuring in surprise. The man in the brown coat froze for a moment, then suddenly spun around and ran. "Rex, block him!" Harper commanded. And immediately, Rex charged forward like an arrow. The market erupted into chaos as people screamed and scrambled out of the way, the large dog running through the aisles, staying on the trail of the fugitive. Harper followed closely behind, her feet moving quickly across the slippery pavement, each step firm and unyielding. Harrington veered into a small alley, darting past old concrete walls and piles of trash. He knew the area well, every dead end, every escape route. But Harper wasn't giving him the chance. She aimed for his leg and pulled the trigger. There was a sharp gunshot, but Harrington managed to dodge, the bullet grazing the edge of his coat. Rex was nearly on top of him, its front legs kicked up as it prepared to tackle its target. But Harrington, in that split second, slammed into a nearby iron door, slamming it shut behind him. Harper reached the door just after, but when she tried it, it was locked from the inside. She pushed hard against the metal, but all she heard was the cold, empty echo. "He got away," Harper muttered, a feeling of disappointment washing over her. She took a deep breath, then turned to Rex, who was shaking his body, its fur on end, still alert. Harper clenched her fists. Harrington might have escaped this time, but he couldn't hide forever. She stood tall, staring at the cold metal door in front of her, her mind focused on one thought. He wouldn't get far. And she wouldn't stop until she had him. Back at the temporary FBI headquarters, Harper, Grayson, and Ethan began strategizing for the final capture. They could no longer rely on traditional investigative methods because Harrington had proven he could erase all traces of himself. At the international airport, a tense atmosphere filled the air as FBI agents meticulously checked each passenger. After Harrington's escape, every entrance and exit was under tight surveillance. The police continuously reviewed passenger lists, scanned each passport, and used the latest facial recognition technology. Yet, despite all the scrutiny, Harrington still didn't appear in the system. He had vanished, as if he had never existed. Suddenly, an alarm sounded from the security gate. On the control monitor, the facial recognition system displayed a match with Harrington. Immediately, a group of agents rushed in, subduing the middle-aged man who was about to board a flight. He was completely caught off guard, with no chance to escape. Harper watched it all unfold. Harrington was captured. But everything happened so easily that she had a bad feeling. Harper stood with Grayson near the security checkpoint, her eyes scanning the line of passengers waiting to board. There was nothing unusual, everything seemed completely normal. Suddenly, Rex barked loudly. The dog was tense, his gaze fixed on a group of passengers ahead. Then, almost instinctively, he stood up, broke away from his spot, and barked again. The dog suddenly growled, his eyes locked on a passenger who had just passed through the checkpoint. It was a middle-aged man, dressed neatly, looking completely unremarkable. He had passed the facial recognition scan without issue, but as soon as he entered the waiting area, Rex became immediately tense. His body stiffened like a bowstring being drawn taut. The dog yanked on his leash, barking loudly, startling the people around them. Harper frowned. Rex had never reacted like that without reason. She glanced at Grayson, and the two of them focused on the man that Rex was fixated on. At first, he continued walking naturally. But just moments later, as if sensing their attention, his steps became awkward. He subconsciously adjusted his collar, quickly glanced at the information desk, and picked up his pace. This doesn't feel right, Harper thought to herself. If he were truly just a regular passenger, why was he acting so nervous? As Harper and Grayson prepared to act, Rex lunged forward, heading straight for the man. Harper was startled but too late to stop him. The dog leaped, his front paws hitting the man hard, causing him to stumble. Before anyone could react, Rex grabbed hold of the man's coat and yanked with all his strength. A tearing sound echoed through the air. The fabric was ripped off, but that wasn't all. Something else fell out with it. Harper and Grayson stared in shock, feeling like everything around them slowed down. A thin, artificial skin slipped to the floor, twisting into a distorted lump, revealing the true face hidden beneath. Michael Harrington. All the agents stood frozen for a moment, stunned. How could there be two Harringtons? Harrington stood motionless, his eyes wide with shock as he realized his plan had been exposed. Michael Harrington was not just a simple traitor. He was a master manipulator and a genius at covering his tracks. Knowing that the FBI would focus on checking each passenger's identity at the airport, he had devised a clever scheme to mislead them. Using a decoy. The man who had been caught at the checkpoint bore an uncanny resemblance to Harrington. When the facial recognition system scanned him, the results matched perfectly, triggering an immediate security alert. While the agents were busy verifying identities and processing the suspect, he used a biopolymer mask to change his appearance and blend it into the crowd, slipping through the security gate undetected. He didn't need to run or use force. Instead, he exploited the very system he had once worked for, a system he knew all too well, with every flaw. His plan was flawless. That is, until Rex uncovered him. The moment he was exposed, Harrington didn't hesitate for a second, immediately turning to flee. But before he could get far, a gunshot rang out. A bullet from an FBI agent pierced his calf, causing him to stagger and fall to the floor. Grayson rushed forward, pinning him down while other agents quickly surrounded them. Harrington screamed in fury, but there was no escape left for him. Harper approached, crouching down to pick up the biopolymer mask from the floor, her eyes narrowing as she stared at it. This technology had once been used to frame her. But now, it was the very thing that exposed the mastermind. Rex stood beside Harper, his tail gently wagging, his eyes fixed on the traitor lying on the ground. At last, the dog had completed his mission once again. Richard Vaughn and Michael Harrington had created a perfect system of power manipulation over many years. They were not merely bribers or involved in shady dealings but rather two critical links that helped Black Widow, a professional assassin organization, survive and thrive without anyone hindering it. From political assassination contracts to eliminations designed to cover up crimes, both Vaughn and Harrington played roles as operatives in the shadows, ensuring everything went smoothly without leaving any trace. Their system was so sophisticated that even high-level investigative agencies couldn't uncover it. Whenever a murder occurred, Black Widow always knew how to clean up the crime scene, manipulate evidence to divert the investigation onto someone else, usually an innocent person or a carefully selected scapegoat. Over the years, Vaughn maintained tight control by ensuring that sensitive cases were always in his hands. Harrington, as a senior inspector with the police department, was responsible for legalizing all the reports, ensuring that all traces led to conclusions favorable to them. Their only mistake, and the gravest one, was choosing Harper Calloway as the sacrificial pawn. When Vaughn received orders from the higher-ups at Black Widow that Brandon Miller needed to be eliminated because he held secrets that could bring the entire system down, he immediately sought a scapegoat, a police officer with a clean record, someone influential enough to convince the public that she was the real culprit. And Harper was the perfect choice. As a seasoned detective, Harper wasn't just good at her job, she was someone with a strong moral code. Ironically, that made her a thorn in Vaughn and Harrington's side. They knew that if Harper continued to dig into unresolved cases, she would soon uncover the truth about what was really going on within the police system. So before she could do that, they planned to eliminate her. Vaughn ordered Black Widow to use biopolymer mask technology to create a perfect replica of Harper. A killer wearing the mask appeared on security cameras at the Brandon Miller crime scene, creating irrefutable evidence. Harrington ensured that all forensic findings matched their fabricated theory, Harper's fingerprints on the gun, fake witnesses set up beforehand, a case so perfectly staged that it left no loopholes. They thought Harper would not be able to resist. But what they didn't count on was Rex. If Harper was an honest cop with sharp instincts, Rex was a working dog with loyalty and intelligence like no other. It was not just a dog following orders. It was a creature capable of sensing things that humans couldn't. The moment Harper was arrested, Rex displayed strange behavior. It refused to work, stopped eating, and kept searching for her. And when Grayson took him in, Rex didn't stop guiding him to crucial clues, step by step exposing the conspiracy Vaughn and Harrington had orchestrated. Rex's persistence was what caused Black Widow's plans to begin unraveling. The dog had sniffed out a piece of the biopolymer mask, proof that the real killer wasn't Harper. Rex had saved Grayson during pursuits, helped him discover the biomask printing warehouse that Black Widow had used to create false identities for their killers. And most importantly, Rex was the one who uncovered Harrington when he tried to escape at the airport by disguising himself as a regular passenger. The biggest mistake Vaughn and Harrington made wasn't manipulating the police system or collaborating with Black Widow. Their mistake was thinking that a dog could not change the course of the war. At the moment of his discovery, Harrington panicked. He couldn't believe it, a dog had exposed him. He had once thought he could control everything, evidence, witnesses, even the legal system. But he couldn't control a creature that was absolutely loyal to its owner. And when the bullet from the FBI agent tore through his calf, when he fell to the ground, when he saw Harper looking at him from a distance with cold, piercing eyes, he knew it was over. Vaughn was arrested shortly afterward. As he was dragged out of the warehouse, his eyes still glowed with rage, but there was no longer the confidence or power he once held. Harper stood there with Rex by her side, both watching Vaughn being taken away like a criminal. The system that Vaughn and Harrington had built over the years had now completely collapsed. Black Widow no longer had any protection, and key members of the organization were being arrested one by one in the FBI's sweeping campaign. Financial records were exposed, and those who had once manipulated justice were now facing the same punishments they had used to condemn the innocent. Harper was finally exonerated. But more than just regaining her freedom, she knew she would never have made it to this day without Rex. It was this dog that had fought tirelessly for her, never stopped trusting her, even when the whole world turned its back on her. As she crouched down to gently stroke Rex's head, he let out a soft groan, his eyes lighting up with happiness. She smiled, her voice full of gratitude. "You saved me once again, old friend." The final verdict was delivered in the federal court. Under the gaze of dozens of eyes, Richard Vaughn stood at the witness stand, his voice trembling as he confessed to all his crimes. His testimony, combined with the evidence gathered from the investigation, exposed the entire Black Widow network, a professional assassin organization that had manipulated the judicial system. Michael Harrington, once a figure who stood among the protectors of the law, now found himself on trial with nothing left to deny. He bowed his head as the life sentence was handed down, ending his days of operating from the shadows, controlling everything from behind the scenes. The courtroom buzzed with whispers as the sentence was read, but the most important thing was that justice had been served. Outside the courthouse, Harper stood silently, gazing up at the sky. Rays of sunlight filtered through the trees, reflecting on the asphalt street still damp with dew. At last, she had been given her freedom. No more suspicious glances. No more accusations. No more unjust confinement. But even though she was free from the prison walls, those months had left their mark on her mind. She had almost lost everything, if it weren't for those who had stood by her until the end. Grayson walked up beside her and gave a nod. "We did it," he said, his voice not loud but enough for Harper to understand. She hadn't just been exonerated by evidence. She had been exonerated by the people who had fought for her, Grayson, Ethan, and Rex. And Rex, the loyal dog who had stood by her side from the beginning, was now next to Harper, his head tilted slightly as if listening to every breath she took. Though the old wounds had healed, the scars of the battle remained, like medals of honor. Rex had always been her most faithful protector, not just with strength but with an unspoken understanding that only those truly connected could feel. The FBI continued to sweep up the remnants of Black Widow, but its system had been completely dismantled. The masterminds were captured, classified documents seized, and every plan exposed to the light. No one could control the world from the shadows anymore. Harper and Grayson were awarded the Medal of Courage, a prestigious honor for officers who had made significant contributions to the protection of justice. In addition, both were promoted. Harper became the captain of a special investigative unit, where she could use her experience to prevent dangerous conspiracies before they happened. Grayson, with his sharp mind and decisiveness, was appointed to lead a specialized team to hunt down dangerous criminal organizations. As for Rex, the most loyal and brave dog, he became an icon. The story of his loyalty and resilience spread far and wide. The media hailed him as a four-legged hero, with his image appearing on national news. An animal protection organization even adopted Rex's image as their symbol, honoring the role of K-9 units in law enforcement. On the day Rex was honored, hundreds of officers and citizens attended the ceremony. A special medal was presented to him, and when Harper bent down to gently place the medal around Rex's neck, he let out a soft groan and nuzzled her, as if he understood the pride everyone felt for him. The applause erupted and went on without end. Harper glanced at Grayson. Without exchanging a word, they understood each other's thoughts. They had faced challenges together, fought for the truth side by side. And now, standing among the people who were honoring them, she knew it had all been worth it. The sky that day was clear, the sunlight softly stretching across the square where the ceremony took place. Rex raised his head, his eyes shining bright with pride. Harper smiled gently. No matter what the future held, she knew that with Grayson and Rex by her side, they would continue to fight for justice, never stopping. The story of Harper Calloway and Rex wasn't just a journey for justice, but a testament to loyalty, trust, and the power of persistence. In a world where truth could be twisted and justice manipulated, the loyalty of a dog had become the guiding light, exposing dark forces and bringing the light back.